The bell tower had no ropes attached to the bell, no pulley system, no visible mechanism for controlled ringing. And yet early photographs show bells of enormous size suspended freely inside open stone frames. Some weighed several tons. The mounting points show where patterns consistent with long-term vibration. The stone around them is polished smooth, not by weather, but by repeated motion. What's missing is the method, how something this heavy was set into motion, and why the structure was engineered as if the motion never stopped. The accepted explanation is familiar. Bells were religious instruments. They marked time. They called people to worship. They signaled events. This explanation accounts for why bells existed, but it does not account for their placement. Some of the largest bells were not mounted on churches. They appear in civic gateways, industrial courtyards, isolated towers at the edge of cities, and even along trade routes. What's missing here is context. These were not devotional spaces. They were functional spaces. The towers themselves raise questions. Doorways beneath many bell frames reach 10 feet in height. Staircases leading upward have shallow risers and unusually wide treads. These are not symbolic dimensions. They are practical. They suggest regular traffic. Repeated use. People moving equipment, not just climbing occasionally to ring a bell. In several locations, the bells are mounted inside stone arches reinforced with iron anchor points embedded deep into the masonry. These anchors are oversized. Some extend several feet into the wall. They were designed to handle sustained force, not brief movement. If the bells were only rung occasionally, the engineering appears excessive. Once this detail is noticed in one location, it becomes harder to ignore elsewhere. Similar bell structures appear across Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and Russia. The shapes differ slightly, but the proportions repeat. Large bells, open frames, reinforced stone, ground-level access aligned directly beneath the bell's center of mass. The repetition is quiet, but persistent. In some cities, multiple bell towers stood within a few blocks of each other. Their sound ranges would have overlapped. If their purpose was simply to mark time or prayer, the redundancy seems unnecessary. But if they were intended to operate together, overlap might have been intentional. Photographs from the late 1800s show these bells intact, polished, and well-maintained. They do not appear abandoned or neglected. By the early 1930s, many are missing. The towers remain, but the metal is gone. The removal appears rapid, not gradual, not random. The official explanation focuses on ideology. Bells were associated with religion. Religion conflicted with the new political order. Bells were removed, melted down, or repurposed. That explanation accounts for why bells disappeared. But it does not account for why some towers were sealed rather than reused. Nor does it explain why certain bells were destroyed instead of recycled efficiently. What's missing here is selectivity. Smaller church bells often remained for years. Larger bells, especially those located in non-religious structures, vanished first. Some were removed quietly, without announcements or public ceremonies. No commemorations. No inventory lists. Maintenance logs from the 1910s and 1920s show routine inspections of bell towers. Notes mention stress fractures, vibration patterns, and resonance adjustments. These terms are not typical for ceremonial objects. After 1930, these logs stop. Not taper off. Stop. Maps from before 1930 often mark bell towers with specific symbols. After 1930, the symbols disappear. The buildings remain, but the function is no longer indicated. Cartographers usually add detail over time. Here, detail is removed. Technical surveys from the late 1920s include brief references to acoustic interference near certain bell sites. The phrasing is vague. Measurements are referenced but not included. One report mentions discomfort among workers during testing. The report ends mid-paragraph. There is no conclusion. Around 1930, something changes in the administrative record. Bell-related documentation drops sharply. Towers that once had maintenance schedules are no longer mentioned. Photographs are reframed to exclude upper structures. Some images appear retouched, with the bells removed but the stone left intact. What kind of event causes a widespread architectural feature to vanish from records within a few years? Not neglect. Neglect leaves decay. This looks like removal. Witness accounts exist, scattered and informal. Workers describe tones that caused headaches, pressure in the chest, vibrations felt through the ground rather than heard in the air. These accounts are anecdotal. They are not verified, but they repeat in different regions using similar language. If the sound was insignificant, there would be no reason to document reactions at all. If it was dangerous, there would likely be studies or warnings. Instead, there is silence. Some bells were reportedly tested before removal. Engineers measured oscillation patterns. Others documented resonance durations that extended far longer than expected. These notes exist only as references. The primary data is missing. In several cases, bell towers were dismantled entirely, while the surrounding buildings were preserved. Stone was carefully removed. Foundations were filled. The work was precise, purposeful, not rushed. Why remove the bell but leave the tower? Why dismantle the structure but preserve the adjacent architecture? These choices suggest priority, not convenience. There are locations where bells were buried rather than melted. Soil disturbances beneath certain towers show shapes consistent with large metal objects. Excavation records do not exist. Ground surveys were never completed. In one regional archive, a memo from 1931 mentions non-essential resonant infrastructure. The phrase appears once. It is never defined. The memo is unsigned. The bells themselves were not uniform. Some had inscriptions. Others were smooth. A few show internal ribbing patterns not visible from the outside. These patterns appear designed to shape vibration rather than sound. If bells were only meant to be heard, why engineer their internal structure so carefully? Why embed them into systems that connected stone, iron, and ground? Some towers show grounding rods extending deep into the earth beneath the bell. Lightning protection is the common explanation. But these systems predate standardized lightning rods. And the rods connect directly beneath the bell, not along the tower walls. Once again, the explanation accounts for some things, but not this. By the mid-1930s, the bells are gone. The towers are empty or repurposed. The discussion stops. No final report explains the removals. No inventory lists what was recovered. No engineering summary closes the subject. The silence is consistent across regions. Different cities. Different administrations. The same absence. If these were only bells, the effort to erase them seems disproportionate. If they served another function, the erasure begins to make more sense. But no document states that function. The stones remain. The anchor points remain. The wear patterns remain. They suggest years of sustained activity. Something repeated often enough to leave marks that weather alone could not produce. What operated here? Why did it require such scale? Why does the documentation stop exactly when the removals begin? The question is not whether bells existed. They clearly did. The question is why their removal was treated as something that needed no explanation. There are still towers standing today where the bell mounts are intact. You can see where metal once sat. You can trace the channels cut into the stone. They lead downward, into the ground, into sealed spaces. Those spaces are no longer accessible. The access points were bricked up. The staircases end at walls. The doors no longer open. Whatever these bells were part of, it was considered finished. If you want to stay with these unanswered details, you can quietly like, comment, or subscribe, and continue noticing what no longer rings.